Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please make sure the volume of this podcast is set perfectly to your listening enjoyment. Please take your seat, whether that's on the treadmill, car, sofa, or bed, and buckle in for the last trip. My name is Jamie Beebe, and I'll be your tour guide, recreating someone's last days in paradise. On behalf of myself and everyone behind the scenes, please enjoy the Last Trip podcast. And because nobody likes a long flight to get to where they want to be, let's prepare for takeoff. When we talk about true crime and travel, we're often talking about the moments that begin with curiosity and end with consequences no one anticipated. The people you meet on the road can become confidants, lifelines, or, in some cases, the most dangerous variables of all. Melissa Rodway has spent years listening to and living those stories. She's recorded more than 180 adventure travel podcast episodes and sat across from travelers and survivors as they unpack experiences that were thrilling, disorienting, and sometimes deeply unsettling. Her debut book, The People You Meet, follows her own backpacking journey through Southeast Asia, a search for connection that reveals how easily strangers can reshape our paths, blur boundaries, and pull us into narratives we never meant to enter. It's been twice named an Amazon bestseller, not because it romanticizes travel, but because it tells the truth about what happens when we trust the wrong moment or the wrong person. Today, we're talking about the thin line between connection and danger, the unpredictability of human encounters, and how travel can quietly set the stage for stories that feel less like adventure and more like a case file. This is a conversation about crossing boundaries, searching for meaning, and the people we meet along the way, sometimes for reasons we don't understand until it's too late. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me on the last trip.
Jamie, it's a pleasure to be here. Great to meet you.
You too. You've recorded more than 180 adventure travel podcasts. What do you think travel teaches us that we don't learn staying in one place? Why do you travel?
I think it teaches us to make decisions in the unknown. When we are at home, we pretty much can predict what's going to happen to us every day. And sometimes that's a nice thing. But I think when you're traveling, it forces you out of your comfort zone to just be in the unknown. I mean, that's the beauty of travel, I think, is not knowing what's going to happen to you every day. That's what I like about it. One of the things I like about it. So I think it teaches you resilience and how to go with the flow and pivot when you have to. And I also think it teaches you how to be more social and more accepting of people. I think, again, when we're at home, we're in our little bubbles and we pretty much know who's coming in and out of our lives. But when you travel, some weird and wonderful people cross your paths that you would never expect. And it teaches you to not judge anyone by their cover and to be open to different types of people, which those are the two things I love the most about travel, actually.
I think everyone's got their first major travel story. Maybe the first time they traveled alone or the first time they traveled as an adult. Tell us your first major travel story.
In my family, it happened quite young. My dad was a teacher, and in 1981, we moved to Australia for a year. I was, I think, 6 turning 7, something like that. And I was from a small town outside of Toronto. And we moved to a very rural part of Australia, Western Australia. So we were outside of Perth in a bush town, and it was tiny. I wouldn't even call it a town. And we swapped houses and my dad and this man swapped jobs. So we went to school in this place that was in the middle of nowhere. We had to take a bush path to get to school, which was pretty wild. And then the school itself was like in the rainforest, more or less. That was probably my first big travel adventure. It was a pretty big one. I had an Australian accent quite quickly, and My parents took us to Bali, and no one was going to Bali in 1981. So I was very blonde, and all the locals would give us chocolate and touch my hair. And then we rented a van. We traveled around New Zealand. We traveled around a lot of Australia. So that was my first big trip, I have to say.
You grew up traveling then, so you got the travel bug early.
Yeah, I got the adventure bug early, that's for sure. But I didn't do a lot after that. We did a lot of camping and things like that. And then in high school, I went to Belgium on exchange. But I would say as an adult, in my late 20s, it became a constant for me. In my 20s itself, I just moved around a lot of different parts of Canada. But traveling was like a thing from my late 20s and onwards.
When you traveled as a child, did you have any idea of any kind of safety? Or were you just kind of going with the flow? When did that start where you were like, oh, I'm traveling and there's things out here I need to know to travel, like street smarts?
I think that happened when I was 19. I took a year off after high school and I went to Jasper, Alberta in the Rocky Mountains for most of that year. But I also went to Europe by myself and I did not do it very well. I don't think I even had insurance. I did not know that things like Lonely Planet existed, so I didn't even have a travel guide. I don't know how I survived that, to be honest, because obviously was no internet. That was a very big wake-up call to learn how to travel because I just relied on people I was meeting in hostels, and I was probably too young to be doing that by myself, but most people do those things, and back then, there was no one to help you. We didn't have phones, so maybe I wrote an airmail letter one day on some paper, I don't know. But that was where I was like, "If I'm gonna do this, I have to figure this out because I don't know what I'm doing."
I started traveling the same way, back in the day. We didn't have cell phones and stuff. And I didn't know about Lonely Planet. I didn't even really know about hostels. I was like, oh, I'll sleep in my car. Like, I'll just sleep on the
Mm,
side of the road. Sometimes I'm shocked that I'm
mhm.
still
Me
alive.
too. Me
Like,
too.
with the traveling that I've done, just one mistake after another where I'm like, how did I survive that trip at all? How did
I
I
know.
function?
I know, it's shocking for me too.
It's definitely easier, I think, these days with cell phones, internet, even just social media tells you where to go, what to do, where to take the best
Yeah.
photos or what to
It
avoid.
I know. It's a totally new world, which is good and bad, I think, but I do think it's much safer how you can barely get lost now traveling. You can easily find the bus, you can find everything and anything, restaurants. And I know with hostels too that now you can even know who's going to be there the date that you're there and they start chatting to one another before they even get there. That part I don't think is cool. I think that that's a real problem for social behavior, but whatever. It is easier and safer. I will give it that. But kudos to us that we survived it before that was a thing.
Was there a point in your travels when you realized that it's not always about the destination, but more often about the people you meet and the experiences you have rather than the place you go?
Yeah, I think it's always been like that for me, and well, even when I was 19, I went around 2 months in Europe, and even to this day, only think about the random people that I met there, and I think that's always been the way for me. I mean, there's certainly places that I am so happy that I went to, and we all have a bucket list of countries, but it's always about the people. When I got into it in my late 20s, I actually started traveling with G Adventures, which is like an adventure travel company. So you would go as a solo person, but you end up with like 10 or 11 other strangers and it's guided, but it's super independent in many ways and very local, like local transportation, local guest houses, things like that. But I think from the get go, for me, it's always the people, right? Like you can come back from a place and say, what a beautiful, magical country this is. The food's amazing. The mountains are awesome, blah, 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 blah. But you always come back with, I met this person and It's the stories, it's the laughter, it's the bonds that you have with people because you end up doing crazy things with people you travel with. If you didn't meet all those people, I'm sure you'd still think those countries are awesome, but it wouldn't be the same.
Your book is called The People You Meet.
Yes.
Why do you think strangers play such a powerful role in shaping these travel experiences? And is it more strangers that are also traveling, or are you meeting more locals?
I think it's both. I'll answer the second part first. I think locals, for me, they're fleeting moments. Unless I'm on like a guided trip where your guide is a local and you're with them for a week to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you certainly get to know them so well and you learn about their country, which is a beautiful thing of those small group adventures. But other than that, like locals kind of randomly pop into your stories here and there, like in this book and the people you meet, we've met some amazing locals. Like the second you get off a bus, they're there and want you to buy their trips or whatever. And you do. And I remember this one guy in Cambodia who just like the second we got off the bus in the middle of nowhere had this like massive permagrin and was just so enamoring and like delightful. There was no way you could not spend time with him. But I think always with languages and stuff, you're not always truly getting to know them. So you know them in a certain way, but they certainly make a huge impact. We were with another guy in Laos who was just like a huge character, taking us on a day trip around a village where there was unexploded ordnance or bombs, more or less. And he had stitches in his foot from drinking too much the night before. Like, those are the local stories that I love. I love the local people. But I think realistically, when you're like on the move constantly, it's travelers, right, that come your way. And I guess the thing is that you're meeting like-minded people. We're meeting people that we're not gonna meet in our daily lives. We're on the same page. There's trust in some ways that you have with them that we don't have with people at home because they get you in a way that other people don't. And I think that opens the door to super interesting conversations. You reveal a lot to these people that you wouldn't to others. Maybe it's because you think you'll never see them again, but that's not always the case. I think you also leave some of your guardedness at home. There's so much to the people you meet on trips. It's fascinating, actually. Those bonds, those conversations.
It reminds me of a story I have where I went to Guatemala and I joined a group to hike up this volcano. And I'm not the most athletic person. I just have to say that up front. But it just so happened that it was a group of women, it was all women. And by the time we were halfway up the volcano, we had talked about every single thing in life. We were all ages. We were talking about men, careers. I felt like we were all best friends. It was amazing. We actually all still stay in touch today, which is crazy to me. Tell us how you decided to write this book, what it's about, what people can expect from the book.
In 2010, I was 35 and I had a partner who worked in luxury travel. And he was going to Southeast Asia to connect and meet and research luxury hotels and different travel routes in that part of the world. I did not love my job at the time, and I don't have kids, and I had nothing holding me back. So off we went, and I was more or less the tag along, but we traveled quite a bit together at this point. We knew how to travel together, although he had way more experience than I did. So what happened for me was that I got a little bit restless, right? Because after like 3 weeks on a trip, for me, I get a little bit cagey, right? And when you're with somebody who has a purpose, it's very different when you're the person without the purpose and you're just hanging around. So I started creating these stories in my head when we were on long haul buses and trains, like 18-hour, 36-hour journeys. And I was creating these stories in my head. And of course, 2010, we didn't have cell phones. So once a week, I sent them home in emails to family and friends at internet cafes and all that fun stuff. And then those emails seemed to have a life of their own. People started sending them to their friends and family, which sent me the message that there was a story. People were enjoying them. They couldn't wait for the next installment, blah, blah, blah. long story short, it took me a very long time because I wasn't sure I would do it. But 15 years later, that book has now come out of all of those emails. The book itself is very funny. It's very honest. I am very transparent with how I feel about things and where I'm at with my life, with my partner, with what we're experiencing. People seem to really like the honesty, the vulnerability, but it's a great story if you're like a traveler or even just an armchair adventurer. It's fun. You'll feel like you're there with me on the journey and you'll learn stuff about that part of the world as well. I do dabble in a bit of the history, culture, geography, food, all that kind of stuff. But more or less, it's just a fun ride to join me on my journey.
Was there ever a time that you felt that you were in an unsafe situation? Did you ever run into anything where you had to make a quick getaway?
We did have one. I probably have a few, but the one that comes to mind is in the book, actually. My partner and I had just gotten into China. We took a bus from Vietnam. We crossed the border. We walked into China and then we had to get on a bus. And so China's a little bit daunting, right? I mean, 2010, it's very different. So we get into China. We're on this bus that goes very late into the night. I think we got into this city around midnight. And it was very dark. And whenever you get into a new country, I'm sure you can relate. You're a little bit like, you haven't figured it out yet. You don't know the lay of the land yet. And it's never great to get somewhere in the dark. That's never fun. But we didn't have a choice. So we pull into this place at midnight. We cannot see, as we pull into the bus station, we cannot see any taxis. And as soon as we get off the bus, this man comes up to us right away. And he says, I'm a local celebrity. He speaks English, which we weren't expecting. So he speaks English. He tells us that he's a celebrity. He tells us there's no way we're going to find a cab and that he will drive us to our hostel at a very good rate and that it's going to be fine. My partner and I are very well versed in jumping into the back of cars of strange men. It's something we've done a lot, and I don't know how we're still here, but anyway. So we got into the car with this guy, but there was a driver. He wasn't driving. So it was this very big man and then this local celebrity, and then we were in the back. As soon as we pull around the corner of the bus station, there's all these taxis lined up. So we were like, oh, how dumb are we? How dumb are we? So we get into the car. So we're driving along. And then all of a sudden, the driver, who does not speak English, slams on the brakes. They get into a massive screaming match. Obviously, we can't understand it. The local celebrity looks back at us and he says, give me something to remember you by. And in that moment, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to kill us. Like, and we were stunned and like, I don't know, it was awful. And then I had nothing to give him. And then he laughed or something and he got out of the car. And then we were just left with this guy who didn't speak English. And it was one of those moments where you're like, oh my God, all these years of us doing stupid things like this has caught up to us and we're going to die. And we had no bearings at all. So in my mind, we were getting further and further away from the city. Like all the lights of the city were now behind us. And we didn't have GPS. We didn't have anything. We didn't know where we were. And then in my mind, I'm like, this guy is going to drive us to an industrial park and he's going to chop us up and we're going to die. And I started having an anxiety attack. And my partner, who traveled way more than I had, even he, I could tell, was like, oh God. And then I thought about my family and I was like, oh my God, how embarrassing that I'm going to die like this. I can't believe I've done this to them. This is awful, awful, awful. And then we ended up at the hostel. It was fine. Like those moments, right? Like are terrifying because you basically are constantly putting your life into the hands of strangers. We've done it a lot, and then another time we were in Nicaragua, and we were in the middle of nowhere, we were in a proper taxi, so we thought and then this guy, the driver, pulled off the side into a country road, pulled off all the panels that had anything to do with it being a taxi, and threw them in the trunk, so we were like, "Again, we're gonna die," and we were fine. But those moments are really terrifying, actually.
It's funny, I've actually been robbed in 2 taxis. So, I feel like
Okay.
taxis sometimes are the worst. It was one of those things where I know to call for a taxi, but I was like, "Oh, there's one, I'll just get in." Don't do that.
Yeah, you're in a
Yeah.
car with a stranger and they know that you don't have a clue where you're going. I think it's different now, right? Because we can actually be in the car and see where we're going and whatever, but
Yeah.
before there was this technology, we're just a target at those places. They know we have no clue.
And now with technology, you're ordering a taxi rather than calling, and it's written down somewhere online where you are, what you're
Yeah, and, like,
doing.
even with Uber, right? You can have a friend track you in the car and all that, so it's a different world, but for me, most of my scary stories always have to do with cars or terrible driving in, like, Vietnam, thinking you're gonna die on the highway. It's awful.
Vietnam is definitely one of the scariest places. I drove a moped through Vietnam, and it was terrifying
Yeah.
99% of the time. Have you ever had a true crime story of your own or know of one, a friend or something where you heard, a fellow traveler that did something or fell into something?
Yeah, I know of a very sad story where someone just went missing. They've never found her, so I don't wanna get into that too much, but this girl, a friend of a friend of a friend, her sister was in China and went to a bank machine at a very strange time of the day, and no one's seen her since, and that was, like, 17 years ago. So, things happen. You just don't know who's coming your way, and I think that you do have to be very savvy, and I think that when we are traveling, there is a tendency to trust people in ways that we don't usually. And sometimes that goes terribly wrong. So I feel quite lucky. What about you, though?
As far as true crime, in Honduras, I did the dumbest thing. I wanted to go snorkeling. I met this guy at the bar, and he said he was a guide and that I could go snorkeling at night with him. And I was like,
Mm,
wow, that sounds fantastic. He wasn't even going to charge me. He had his own boat. I was like, that's great. Let's go. So nighttime rolls around and get in the boat alone with this man I don't know. So now
yeah.
I'm in a boat with a guy who's driving me into the middle of the ocean to go
Mm,
snorkeling in the dark, which also, like, what was I thinking? So luckily, he turned out to be an okay dude. We're in the water, and it's illegal to snorkel where we were at night. So all of a sudden, I hear something and I see lights, and we come up, and there's a gun at my head. And
oh
I'm like,
god.
okay, that's bad because I'm in the water. I'm in a bikini at
Mhm.
night. And it was the authorities. I don't even really honestly know who. I don't speak Spanish that well, especially when I'm terrified. So, since it was illegal, they wanted to arrest us because they thought we were stealing lobsters
Mhm.
or crabs or some kind of animal.
Mm,
But I think once they realized that I was just a dumb American, they're like, all right, fine, just go. I
right.
got in the police boat and they took me back to shore and told me, in not so many words, not to be a dumbass.
Yeah, that's pretty scary.
A million things could have gone wrong in that
Yeah.
story. That was probably not the one that I would have thought of as going wrong once I realized that I made a dumb decision.
I remember one night in Ecuador, we were going to a restaurant, and it was in a dodgy area. I forget what city we were in, and my partner was taking a picture of something. And as soon as he did that, this guy came around the corner with, like, a screwdriver and a hammer and was about to clobber him. And luckily, I had seen him coming and just started screaming, and it scared him. We're all very lucky, and I don't wanna paint a bad picture of any of these countries. It could happen in Toronto. I live in Toronto. It's very
Oh, yeah.
dangerous parts of Toronto too. It's just happens to be time and place sometimes. It's just scarier when you're not in your own country.
I think when you're traveling, you have a tendency to let your guard down in
Yeah,
ways that you wouldn't at home.
totally.
What are some reasons that you think you have made it out alive in all of these situations? Because not everybody does make it home.
Totally.
Something that you learned through your travels, some kind of advice to help other people who might be out there traveling?
I think that you just have to have your gut instinct in check, and do think that I'm pretty savvy with people. I mean, certainly not always, but I'm 51 and we kind of grew up at a time where we raised ourselves in a lot of ways. I was a latchkey kid. I was home by myself after school a lot. While my family was great, I do feel like we had to look out for ourselves in a lot of different ways. And that's never left me. I remember when I was 19 in Europe, I went to a bar one night with some guy that worked at the hostel, and I was drinking, and his buddies came to the bar, and I remember they were and I could drink a lot back then, as I'm sure we all could, and I remember they're all more ordering more and more drinks, and then something switched in me where I was like, "They are very intent on getting me really drunk," and something inside me went, "Run, get out of here." And then I somehow got out of that bar through a bathroom window and made it back to my hostel. I think about that a lot because I am very grateful that something inside me said, "Get out now." So I think that I have that in me, and I kind of rely on my own survival instincts to kick in. But for some reason, I know you're right, not everybody has that intuition with people and who you can trust and who you can't, and it's very, very sad. And I think the other part of that is that's the fun of travel, right? Is to let people in and to, like, trust people and to have fun, but you do have to have a radar about you, about who's coming your way and what they're telling you, and again, we're not always right, but I don't know what it is about me. I think, though, that I do think that my whole life I've kinda had to look out for myself, and I just know no one's coming to get me except me. So that's probably what it is.
Do you think that traveling as a woman has changed the way that you travel when you see men travel or when you travel solo or traveling as a couple?
I don't love traveling solo, to be honest. I think it's important actually to experience the variety of options. So I have done everything from complete solo travel to couples travel to group travel to travel with a friend. And I like them all. They all have their pros and cons. There's parts of solo travel that I really, really love, and that's when you're like completely, like there's nobody. I do love the freedom of that. I think it's very important and exciting for women to have that. But I also know that the same day that you're feeling, like, so exuberant about, "Oh, I'm just gonna go jump into the sea, while I'm hiking, and I'm gonna eat this gelato, and I'm gonna have an afternoon beer, and I'm gonna do whatever I want." 3 hours later, you can feel like the loneliest person in the world, right? So it can be like a roller coaster. And I do find after a few weeks of that, it can be a little bit tiring, and I don't always feel as social when I'm completely alone because I think I am a little bit more guarded. So I do prefer small group travel, but on my own with no friends. I don't wanna know anybody, I wanna meet new people. I do actually quite like that. But yeah, solo travel is, I think, much easier than it used to. I was in Mexico for a couple of weeks 2 years ago on my own, and just the fact that you can load up your time with, a walking tour, a food tour. I went out one night, speaking of trusting people, with a local guy who it was like a tour, but it was me and a couple other people, and he picked me up, and we went to all the local taco and beer places that tourists don't go to, and he drove me back home to my place, and it was perfectly fine. So I think that it's safer than it used to be because you don't have to figure it all out anymore. There's so many activities and options now that you can just randomly do, and I do actually really like that part. I think that's very cool. It's not easy though, like, the same thing happened to me where I rolled into some town in Mexico late at night by myself, and it's just that never is fun. That will never be fun to me, and you just think, like, anyone that comes up to you, even if they're trying to help you, it's just not the same when you don't have someone who's got your back. That part is stressful sometimes.
You mentioned that you like the small group traveling, groups of people
Yeah.
you don't know. How do you find those groups? How do you figure out which ones that you wanna get into, and what's kind of the process there for you?
I kinda landed into this company when I was in my late 20s. I went to a travel show, and it was called Gap Adventures at the time. It stood for Great Adventure People, and now they, as you can imagine, when you have a company named Gap, it didn't work out so well. So they're now G Adventures, and I've done tons with them. That was kind of like brand loyalty. They're a Canadian company, but they do stuff all over the world. So for me, I stick with companies like that. Intrepid is another one that I've used because they are adventure focused and they interact with local communities and they're using local accommodations. That's what I like about it. So I look for things like that. I want to have authentic experiences. I still want to do off the beaten path stuff. I just don't want to plan it or deal with it myself sometimes. And then I've gotten much more into active travel. So hiking trips and cycling trips, so then I look for companies that focus on that. And it's cool, right? When you meet, like, other cyclists or hikers, that's kind of fun too to have those are very big bonding experiences as well. So I just look for companies like that, but I'm never going to be on a bus with 35 people with a flag, that's not me, but a group of 10 is, like it's really fun, actually. I was in Colombia last year, and I was traveling with Australians and Germans, and when you're together for 3 weeks, it's like family. You feel like you've known them forever in a short time.
How do you choose the places that you go to? Do you take safety into account, or is it random, or do you have a list?
Safety, rarely. I have ideas in my mind of the places that I wanna go to, but once in a while, a country, I'll just feel like I need to go there. Like in 2020, I went to Jordan. It wasn't something that was really even on my radar, and suddenly I was like, "I'm gonna go to Jordan," and I loved it. It was amazing. Same with Nepal. It just suddenly I felt like that's where I had to go. But certainly there are things and experiences that I do wanna have, but if something all of a sudden gets into my nervous system, then I just go for it.
What are a couple of the favorite places that you've been to, like, where you could go back again and again?
Well, I try not to go anywhere more than once, but I will say that I do love Mexico like you do. I think that it's very beautiful and it's so big and there's so much to see there. So that's one country that I've gone to multiple times. I did really love Jordan, actually. It's so beautiful and the people are very friendly and generous. But my favorite parts of the world, I don't have any favorite countries, but I love Spanish speaking countries. I love Central America. I love the chaos and the fun and South America as well. So that's the part that speaks to me. As I get older, I'm kind of now just discovering Europe. 'Cause I think when I was in my 30s and 40s, I didn't want anything to do with that. I wanted, like, the harder stuff. But now I'm like, "Oh, Europe is looking very good."
I kind of felt the same way about Europe. I only recently started exploring Europe more because my fiancé is really into Europe. He's lived in Europe and just likes it over there, but
Yeah,
I like the chaos of Central America and South America a lot.
I do too.
And the peacefulness of Asia for me is nice because it's very safe. I feel very safe in Asia.
I
Yeah.
felt like in Asia, because a lot of those countries believe in karma, that I felt safer there, and I don't know if that's me, that was my placebo effect, but that's how I felt there. It was like they kind of believed that they need to be good to everybody, so let's go with that.
I think especially as a woman, I felt safer there though.
Yeah.
I want to pivot a little bit and talk some more about your book. What do you want people to get out of reading your book?
You know, it's not really even about the travel, about this book. I mean, I that part is obviously that's the huge part of the people you meet, but I just want people to find their own adventure. And I think that sometimes we can be very intimidated by certainly what's going on social media. Like there's so many travel accounts on there where people are so beautiful and they have the best clothes and the best gear and they look like they know exactly what they're doing. And that is not me. I'm very normal. I lead a very normal life. And I think my book, the way that I write and the tone of it is very human and very normal. And so I just want people to find whatever makes them tick and find their own adventure. And that it's such an important part of our lives. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't even have to be about traveling, but it's something we all should do just to feel alive. So I think that's part of it. And the other part is just to be more honest, maybe, and vulnerable and human. And, there's a lot in that book that's not glamorous about who I am and what I am and how I've handled things. And the more that we can speak that way to people and show our vulnerability, the more we realize we're all the same. And maybe that will help this world be a little bit more understanding and kinder. And it's also really funny. I just want people to laugh. We need a laugh, and it's very entertaining, I will say.
It's interesting what you said about social media and how social media portrays traveling. I went to Bali, and you can hire people to follow you around and take photos of you in all the iconic places. It was
Mm.
crazy to me. And I watch all the travel social media accounts and stuff a lot of times just to know where I might want to go or what I might want to
Yeah,
see. And more often, it's just the person in some outfit sitting there. I want to know a little bit more about the history of it or what's really happening. So I do
totally.
think social media is changing the way that we travel. I think it opens the door for more travel, but I also think people think it's going to be this glamorous thing where they're going to be walking down the beach in a dress. But when you haven't showered in 3 days and can't find your dress, that's harder to do.
It's so true that I traveled in 2023. I took a year off and I did some trips. And one of those trips was in Bolivia. I went to the salt flats and I was in a Jeep. But it's not easy. So I was in this Jeep for like 3 or 4 days, and it was not a great Jeep, and we were like sardines, and it was horrible, but it was worth it. The landscape there is the most beautiful and colorful, and it's just shockingly beautiful. But I was with 2 influencers, young influencers, and they drove me crazy. They were kind enough, but when we got to the actual salt flats, the pictures that had to be taken for them specifically. And it's just like what you said. We were for days like disgusting, like barely showering. I was in crappy clothes because that's how I travel. But all of a sudden, they're in all their spandex glory on these salt flats. And I'm like, this is not representative of how we got here. And I get it. Like, that's the world that we live in right now, but it's just not my world. And for me, I do post a lot of stuff on Instagram for my trips. It's actually delayed because I don't even know what I think yet or how I feel about it. And that to me is I have to be my authentic self when I do any of that stuff. And I just find that it's just like constant, right? Like they're not even in the moment. They're just getting stuff out there. And that's fine. That's how it goes. But for me, I need time to process what just happened and what I just saw.
I totally agree. And especially about not being in the moment part. I take pictures, of course. I travel. I love taking pictures. I love posing, doing the whole thing. But I always try to limit it to like 5 minutes of photos. I can get 1,000 pictures in 5 minutes. Like I
Yeah.
think anybody can. And then just enjoy the moment, enjoy the space. Talk to somebody around me about it or be alone in my thoughts rather than different poses and
Yeah.
aspects of the photo.
Oh my God.
I've seen a lot of influencers traveling, and it must be exhausting to have to do all the poses and take all the pictures when I would rather just do the traveling instead.
That's how I feel too. It doesn't actually appeal to me. Many people have said, "Oh, why don't you do that?" And I can't think of anything worse. Because then, what's the fun in traveling if that's I don't know. It just doesn't look fun to me.
Well, and a lot of times too, when you go down to read the caption of the photo, it's not really anything about where it is or what
No.
it is that they're posing in front of. I kind of want to know what's the history. Do a little bit of this is the iconic
Me
Buddha
too.
that was built in whatever year and why it's here. But each to their own. For listeners who want to see more of your work, what's the best place to find you, your book, social
Yeah,
media, podcasts, everything?
totally. The book is on Amazon and it's again called The People You Meet. And look for my name, Melissa Rodway, because I realized later that that's not the only book with that title. On Instagram, I'm at fly_travel_media. And my website is flyrodway.com, and you'll find all my interviews there as well. That show is called Fly Travel Radio.
Awesome. And we'll add all those links in the show notes as well. Is there any last minute advice that you want to give to our listeners about staying safe, staying alive, traveling the best way possible?
I don't know that I'm the best person for that question because I'm still figuring it out. I do think it can't hurt for people to know where you are these days. And I did not grow up like that. In my family, also, when you went away, it was like, I guess I'll see you when I'm back. And that's how it went. And we didn't think about that. I mean, that's just how it was. And that's fine. But I do think it can't hurt now. We have the technology for people to know where you are. So if you're traveling alone, there's something to that. And yeah, if you're a woman traveling alone, I would do what we were talking about earlier, like follow up with some of these awesome day trips that you can do. And you will meet some really cool people even doing that. Because I think like still there are women that I've met them recently on talking about this book that are still afraid to venture out on their own. I think there's no reason anymore for that. And it's so important to get away from everyone that you know and everything that you know and all your creature comforts and your day to day. If you're nervous about that, again, there's group trips. There's all these trips we were talking about, like even for 2 hours one day, just go on a walking tour of a city. That's always a really good thing to do anyway, so that you can familiarize yourself with. But yeah, I just think there's no excuse anymore. Find your own adventure. And who cares if it doesn't look like other people's adventures? That's one thing that I also like to talk about is travel ego. There's a lot of comparisons that people make about traveling if they've been out longer or more countries or better adventures. I can't stand any of that dialogue. Do what you want to do as long as you're not hurting people. And if you're enjoying yourself, then go for it. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for that. Yeah, I think just find your way to go for it.
I 100% agree with all of that. And also, there's crime in every corner of the world, every corner. Oftentimes, I would rather travel than go down to Hollywood Boulevard because it's probably safer to go to Mexico than Hollywood Boulevard most nights.
You're so right. And as I was saying, last year I was in Colombia. And Colombia still, when you tell people you go there, they're like, oh, I'm sure there's parts of Colombia that you probably shouldn't be going to. There's parts of downtown Toronto that you shouldn't be going to. But the places that I went were so incredibly safe. I felt safer on their subway system in Medellin than I do in Toronto. It was cleaner. People are really silly when it comes to this, what they see in the news and what they hear and what even historical facts we're holding on to about things that happened in countries a very long time ago. Like, come on. So you got to do a little bit of homework here and realize that it's not as scary as what people want us to believe.
And get out there and do it because life ends too quick. You're not going to have time later. Do it
No,
now.
do it now.
Melissa, thank you so much for joining us on the last trip. And I hope everybody goes out and grabs a book because it's amazing. Really just appreciate all your insight and travel.
Thank you, Jamie. I really enjoyed our very awesome conversation. So thanks for the time and you ask very good questions.
Travel is often sold to us as escape, freedom, beauty, the promise that stepping somewhere new will somehow make everything clearer. But, as Melissa reminds us, travel is also a mirror. It reflects our curiosity, our openness, and sometimes our blind spots. The people we meet on the road can become guides, teachers, friends, or brief intersections that leave a lasting mark. Melissa's work lives in that honest middle space. It celebrates connection without pretending risk doesn't exist. It invites adventure while asking us to stay aware of ourselves and others. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Not to travel less or to travel afraid, but to travel awake, to listen to our instincts, to trust our curiosity without surrendering our boundaries. If you want to explore more of Melissa's stories, you can find her podcasts and her book, The People You Meet, wherever you listen and read. We'll link everything in the show notes as well. And finally, remember to leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars if you like the show, or hell, even if you don't. But either way, feel free to let me know what you think. Please follow The Last Trip on Instagram at The Last Trip Crime Pod and subscribe on Patreon to support the show. You'll get extra research, videos, photos, and updates, and even learn more about my personal travels. That's patreon.com/The Last Trip Podcast. I'm Jamie Beebe, bringing you your last trip and signing off until the next one. Thanks for listening.